Well, welcome all of you to the this evening's program. We're very happy to have Ben Snyder with us. I'll just say a couple of things and happy to have all of you with us. It's sponsored by Benicia Literary Arts. I think, as far as I know, it may be the first thing we've ever had about screenwriting and the things that Ben has spent his life doing. So it will be very interesting. And we are recording it because several people who wanted to come couldn't make it, so that it'll be available for them afterwards. I have to thank Ben's father particularly, because I just happened to say to him, that we wanted somebody, and he gave me his son's number. So that was very nice. And Ben, we really appreciate your being here. We've publicized your background, so I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to turn it over to you and say welcome and thank you very much, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thanks for having me. We can be as informal as we want. I don't know how you normally do these. What I was planning to do was tell you a little bit about my there we go, professional trajectory, and then take you through what I understand as some of the foundation building blocks of narrative storytelling as it relates to feature film writing, which is how this craft relates to an industry. And there's a lot of people that do other things and write short form and do experimental videos, but in kind of when I teach, it's vocational training. It is to train people to work in the industry, and that might or might not be most useful or interesting for your intents and purposes. So I'll build in opportunities for you to ask questions and maybe steer me towards things that are more useful. Maybe before we get started, are you all good using the chat feature? Is that available to everyone? Maybe you could just tell me, if you are a writer or you identify as a writer, what kind of writing you do. If you're a poet or you write fiction, or you're a playwright, or you are a screenwriter, or you've done some screenwriting, just to get a sense of who's in the virtual room. If people want to throw that in the chat, that's always interesting and useful to me, what kind of writers we are. Recreational writer, I don't know if I know what that means, but I think you write for fun, sport, journaling, whatever you do, however we relate to it. Okay. Nonfiction and fiction, stories, memoir. Okay. Great. And I'll keep the chat open as people throw things in there. I started professionally as a playwright 25 years ago, and I in New York, and I started to get a little bit of attention, and I was hired to adapt novels to screenplays by small production companies that did not want to hire WGA members. So they were grabbing playwrights to do screenwriting. And I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. And I wrote some feature screenplays professionally. And then they didn't get made. And I was frustrated because I spent a lot of time on those jobs and was excited. And it's interesting because screenwriting borrows from every other type of writing. It borrows from every literary tradition. There's a piece of it that's like playwriting. There's a piece of it that's literary, like fiction, but it's not literature. And there's even elements that kind of borrow from poetry. But it's a blueprint for something else. It's not considered fine art. You are hard pressed to find many screenplays that people pick up and read the way you would read a play or a poem or a novel. it's funny, plays are also a plan for something else, but for some reason they've been allowed to cross over and become fine art, where people are like, oh, I'll read this play. Or screenwriting, you're not studying screenplays in a high school English class the way you're studying Shakespeare or Mamet or whoever else you're looking at. So I was frustrated with that, and I started making my own short films, and then eventually I made a feature film and got more work writing, and got frustrated with that because I can talk more about the business of it, but the film industry has been contracting for a long time while the television industry has been expanding. And we're in an interesting moment in that tension, as all of us in the industry are on strike at this moment, which is why I have time for something like this. And I did a lot of TV work for a period of time, and I pitched and I wrote in rooms and I produced and did TV work. So I've kind of done the gamut of these things. But I teach screenwriting, and I'm the de facto area head of screenwriting at Brooklyn College, and I have taught a bit at NYU and a few other colleges. And what I was planning for this evening is a kind of introduction to narrative storytelling, kind of what that is and how that works, and then how a feature film is structured. And I can refer you all to other resources that can help you if you want to write a screenplay. But that's another question I might ask, like, what do you want to get out of this? Are you interested in writing a screenplay, or is it just a general curiosity of what is screenwriting? If you want to add to the chat kind of what your hopes are for our time together. And then I'll just get into it, my shtick. This is all a preamble. Naomi, when you say I want to write one, do you mean a feature film, or do you mean like just a short script, or okay. All right. I'm gonna get into it, and then I'm gonna leave time to talk, adapt a novel. Okay. Great. And I can answer more specific questions. Actually, does anyone have any questions at this moment before I get into it? And we can do questions in the chat or questions live with your voice. Yes, Lois.
So is screenwriting for television and movie industry the same, or are they different?
They're different. So so television, the idea in TV is to create an unsolvable problem that can go on forever, whether it's comedic or dramatic. And it's a story best told in small pieces, right? Mm-hmm. We like getting it in half-hour or hour-long segments. And that's a particular kind of story. And a film has a beginning, middle, and end, and the ending is over, it's satisfying. The exception to that, which I learned relatively recently, I started doing some studio work, and I was brought in to pitch on some intellectual property, a comic book series, and they said, that's a great pitch, but what's in the second, third, fourth, fifth film, which I'd never thought of before, because they're in studio land, they are thinking about franchise. It's different though than thinking about 20 something episodes in a season of television. But whether it's episodic, meaning there's a kind of new beginning, we kind of reset every episode, where you can start an episode 17 or episode 2, it doesn't matter, or serialized, where you have to watch it in order. It's the idea with television is it's kind of it's best served to us in these small bite-sized pieces rather than all at once in 2 hours or 90 minutes as a film. And there's a number of other ways they work differently. Does that answer your question, Lois?
Yeah. No.
I've got a question.
Sure.
You know, on the Academy, oh. you
Maybe
hear-
if we mute ourselves when we're not talking, I think we'll get less feedback. Go
Oh,
ahead,
Yeah,
Sarah.
Sarah, on the Academy Awards, when they vote for the best screenwriter, has everyone read the screenplay? Or how can you vote on it if you, I don't quite see how you can know it's a good screenplay.
Yeah, they don't. They watch the movie and they assume that the script was good based on what they saw. I had a film last year at the Tribeca Film Festival and we won Best Screenplay, and people were very excited, but I was kind of like, this is bullshit because I had never submitted the script to anyone. They don't know if it's a good script. So yeah, they do not. That's the WGA, which I'm a member of. When we vote on script awards, that people will send us their scripts. So we're picking movies, we're picking adapted films, we're picking television series in half hour and an hour long, and we're getting scripts. But a lot of the awards for these scripts are awarded by people that haven't read them.
Okay. I thought I was going crazy. I thought, how could you make that connection?
I also
reading the screenplay.
I also learned recently. I've been organizing some of the union activities. I was a strike captain. I'm less active at this moment, but I learned some of us know the long arc of history in union organizing as it relates to the entertainment industry. And there were, I want to say in the 30s. I'm not an expert in this history. There was someone at an event who shared it with me. There was a big push to organize directors, to organize writers, and to get a fair share of the revenue, which is what all these strikes are about. There's signs people are holding that we're asking the 1% for 1%, and that's essentially what we're doing at this moment as we're on strike. But they said the unions were destroyed by the studios, and in that year that they failed to unionize, something called the Academy was created by the studios, and they said, don't worry about unions, don't worry about residuals and money. We'll give you a gold star. Here, you can have a little trophy. You want to be recognized? We'll give you a little trophy. And it was an anti-union show that is the Oscars that some of us tune into. But I didn't know that history, which I thought was interesting.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much.
Sure. But it makes sense when you think about what people, oh, well, look what so-and-so is wearing, or what we're focused on in those moments. Any other questions? And I'm just going to get right into it. I can't see everyone at once. So if you want to start talking. Otherwise, I'm going to get into it. So, and this might be review for some people. I'm going to start with kind of foundations. In this medium, there's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of snake oil salesmanship, where people are, I'll teach you how to sell a script for $1 million. And there's a lot of different programs that use their own words to say the same thing. And I'm going to try to speak in simple language and agreed upon industry standards. So my understanding of narrative storytelling is coming through the Aristotelian tradition. The kind of earliest writings on this are in the Poetics by Aristotle. You don't have to read it. It's not a requirement unless you're wanting to kind of be a scholar of these things. That said, there are other traditions. There's two stories I like to tell. These are stories I tell on my first day of screenwriting class. One of them is, if you'll bear with me, I used to fly a lot between the East Coast and the West Coast, and I would look for the cheapest ticket. And those are usually not direct flights. It's usually a flight out of Newark, New Jersey with a layover somewhere. And I was on one such flight, and I sat down, and the guy in the middle seat had shoulders. He was taking both armrests, and there was nothing humanly possible to do about that. And he had tattoos and he had muscles, and he was very friendly and very talkative. And the layover was in Las Vegas where he was getting off, and he was going there to fight somebody, which I thought was really interesting. He was a professional fighter, and he's not a superstar. He had a gym in New Jersey where he kind of helped people get in shape and train in these things, which a lot of these guys do. But his passion was fighting, and he wanted to be a competitive fighter. And very different from what I do for a living. So I was chatting him up and just trying to learn more about who he's fighting and how he feels about it and whatnot. And I said, if there's so many martial arts styles. Like there's my parents do martial arts. I grew up around a lot of different things. There's karate and kung fu, and there's now, I don't know if anyone watches competitive fighting. There's a lot of like Brazilian jiu-jitsu influenced things out of Russia. There's sambo fighting, very brutal and effective. And I said, what's the best style? What do you think's the best style? And he looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. He said, there's no best style. Anyone who says their style's the best is not a real martial artist. I was like, okay, that's a good answer. But I wasn't satisfied. So I said, if I wanted to get really good at beating people up, if that was my goal in life, what style should I pick? What would you recommend? And he said, again, he looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. And he said, listen, it doesn't matter. You can study karate, you can study Aikido, you can study capoeira, you can study anything. What matters is that you study it to the point of mastery, and then it'll be there for you when you need it. And he's thinking like self-defense. And I was like, that's a great answer. He's probably a really good teacher. So I like to say, in the world of narrative storytelling, I'm going to offer you a style tonight. I'm not saying it's the best style, but if you master it, it will be there for you when you need it. Okay, more on that to come. And then the other thing I like to say before I teach my class is I say, imagine that we were in a screenwriting class and you walked into the room and there was a pile of wood on the floor. And I said, everybody get up. We're going to make chairs on our first night of screenwriting. And you would kind of look at each other confused and start picking out pieces of wood. And we have lots of wood, and there's glue guns and hammers and nails and screwdrivers. And we have, you can sand wood over here. You can, if you get to it, you can put some paint on it if you want. You can finish it. And if we had a few hours, you could everyone here could probably make a chair, I imagine. However, I might make a very creative chair, a very colorful chair, but when you sit in my chair, it will probably collapse. But if Nancy has studied basic carpentry and just knows the basics of how to properly conjoin a leg to a seat to a back, when you sit in her chair, it'll hold your weight. And it's not to say Nancy's chair is more creative or dynamic or cool than my chair, but it just won't fall apart. We study craft in relation to narrative storytelling, so our stories don't fall apart. And some of you, I see, have been writing for a while, might have had the experience of a story falling apart. And craft is a way to prevent, to avoid, and to repair when that does happen. Okay, what is craft? So the foundational building blocks, these are some words you might be familiar with. I'm going to do a little maybe interaction with the chat. If I say the word protagonist, what do you think of? This is language back to Aristotle. How do you define protagonist? And you can even look it up. Anybody want to throw in the chat what a main character? Great, Lois. And if you're in a world that has more than one person, how do you know which one is the main character? How do you identify that? The star. Okay. Well, that could be the person who's the biggest celebrity, the heroine. Great. So in simplest terms, and people can keep writing in the chat as much as they want. In simplest terms, a protagonist is someone that wants something. The most important word being want. And just to start orienting yourself around a character with a want or a need or both. So I'll just maybe, Sarah, can you make up a character name? I can't hear you for some reason. Maybe.
Esmeralda.
And what might Esmeralda want as a character?
Fame.
Fame. And does Esmeralda care what she does to get famous, or she just wants fame?
She cares. She has ethics.
But what would she like to be famous for?
Writing
Great.
novels.
Novels, right? And so what I'm doing, rather than brainstorming, I'm asking close questions, right? And I might even, if we continue down this path, I might even ask, is she a genre writer? Is it literary fiction? Get closer and closer. Is it period pieces? And there's an idea, I'm forgetting who said, maybe someone knows, that in the specificity of things, they become universal. Where if you tell me a very specific detail about your childhood, though I had a totally different childhood, it will make me think of mine. But if you speak about your childhood in generalities, I will not think of mine. There's a funny alchemy that happens with specificity. Okay, so we have someone who wants to be famous for this particular thing. Nancy, I'm just grabbing names that I see in front of me. There's Nancy again, the carpenter. Can you give me a character name and a want?
I want you to know that I am the carpenter's daughter.
Amazing.
That is why my chair succeeded.
Give me a name of a made up character.
Jamie.
And what does Jamie want?
Jamie wants to excel in all the bicycle races that he enters.
Great. And the other thing, one thing I really like about this is it's visual. If we're thinking cinematically, training, racing, bicycling, different landscapes, it's really visual. Okay. So characters are defined by wants. Period. Full stop. What do they want? Aristotle broke the wants down into 3 categories. He said they can want to do something, they can want to make/build something, or they can want to understand something. These are the 3. Doesn't matter, just to give it to you, so to save you the trouble of reading the book. And the word paired with that is protagonist, is antagonist. So what is an antagonist? Maybe we can drop it in the chat. What defines an antagonist? We're going to get some more advanced terminology soon. A villain. Okay, thank you, Naomi. Does an antagonist have to be a person? Do we need someone twisting their mustache, up to no good, black hat? What is their function? What makes them a villain? Conflict with the protagonist could be a situation. So I like the word obstacle. So somebody wants something, but they can't get it. So the mantra in narrative storytelling is, what do they want? Why can't they get it? What do they want? Why can't they get it? It could be a person. It could be a situation. It could also be psychological, where the protagonist is their own antagonist. A lot of times we are that to ourselves if we haven't done a basic amount of therapy in our lives. And just to clarify this, if we were doing let's say a love story, Gail, can you give me a name, a character name? I'm sorry, I don't know if everyone's mic works.
Um,
it doesn't have to be that interesting. Any name will do.
Okay, Jack.
Jack. And who's Jack in love with?
Jane.
Jack is in love with Jane. Jane,
Jane,
Jack
Jane.
and Jane, Jack and Jane. Great. So if in kind of classic Aristotelian terms, Jack wants Jane, but if it's a person, maybe Jane's father is like, Jack, get away from my daughter, right? That's our villain. That's our person as antagonist. But it doesn't have to be a person, right? Jack wants Jane, but Jane only dates guys that drive fancy cars, and Jack doesn't even have his driver's license, right? That's a situation, right? Forget about that. Jack wants Jane. Jane is trying to give Jack all the messages. I like you too. Just ask me out already. But Jack feels unworthy of love and will never ask Jane out. So Jack is his own antagonist. That's the self or psychological antagonist. Do those distinctions make sense to you all? So what I would ask, what I'd ask you to do at this time, is if you have something to write with and something to write on, a pen or a pencil, piece of paper, typing is okay. If you could try to do 3 sentences with a character who has a want and an obstacle, and try to vary the wants and vary the obstacles, right? Rather than, but they don't have enough money, but they don't have enough money, which are situations that are real, that are an obstacle for a lot of things. Try to have an obstacle for one of them that is a person, an obstacle for another that's a situation, an obstacle for another that is psychological. In film development and TV development, we call these log lines. You might have heard this word. It's one sentence that expresses the central dramatic tension. Somebody wants something, but. Try to do 3 of them. Can you create one with a person as an antagonist, one with a situation as an antagonist, one where the person themselves is the antagonist? Can you have a variety of wants? This is just an exercise. Log lines are a tool of development to know what your central conflict is. They're also something you need for pre-production to get collaborators to quickly express what it's about when you're talking to a cinematographer or an actor. They're also something you need to submit when you're going to festivals, when you're selling the movie. It's a really important sentence. I have hard time writing these, so sometimes I will go to IMDb and just look up a random movie and look at the log line. Every movie on IMDb has to have a sentence expressing what it's about, which is a sentence that gets at the central conflict. Sometimes they'll use 2 sentences. It's supposed to be 1. Did everyone get 1? Do we have 1? And they don't have to be super exciting or great. You could try to do one for a project you're actually working on. Sometimes just distilling it to that sentence is clarifying for things in a project. Like, I didn't realize this was the central tension. I need to orient myself more around this. I was too focused on a subplot or a detail that's not the central conflict. If you would be willing to, I would ask you to type as many as you want into the chat. We're just sharing log lines. And I want to say, dare to be boring, dare to be cliche. This is just an exercise. It's not a test of anyone's ability or potential. Sam wants a watermelon, but he lives on an island where there's no watermelons, or whatever. Can we create a want and an obstacle? Jack wants to date Jane, but she's a celibate nun. Great, and we understand it. John wants a job at a company, but he doesn't have all the skills required. Oh, he knows someone who works there, so you've given him an in. You actually, I'm going to pick on you, Lois, a little bit. You made it easier, right? The fact that he knows someone who works there generally is a good thing when you're trying to get a job, right? So an adage in our tradition is create a character that you love and then torture them. So what I would say is his ex-wife works there, right? I want to make things harder, not easier for the character, right? His ex-wife is the CEO. How do we make things harder? Never easier. Okay. George couldn't get to the appointment because of the crowd. The tense of it is we're after it. So George is trying to get to an appointment, but there's a crowd. In screenwriting, you can only write in present tense. And as we look and read screenplays, we'll see it. You can't say he ran, you say he runs, because you can only film present tense. And these are things that distinguish it from literature, being stuck in a present tense. A flashback is a flash present. We're filming it in action. Willie wants to be Max's partner, but it's 1967 and no one by Black salesman. Great. Gabby wants to build a house but doesn't have the money. Okay. Is this making sense? The two things that I would watch out for here is, does the want to line up with the obstacle? So like Peter wants a dog, but he already has a bird. I don't know how that's an obstacle. I'm just making things up. We want to be really clear how the antagonist is stopping the protagonist, right? Is the bird scared of dogs? How does this create a dilemma, create a problem? The other thing that sometimes happens, I think, is that we get lost in our worlds. Rick wants to play college football, but has received no scholarship offers. Great. George, okay. Sometimes we start doing world building. You know, I'll ask for a log line in a screenwriting class, and someone will come back with, it's the year 2089. We're on the planet Zezabar. There are 16 warring tribes all fighting for the flower, which has a power that can generate infinite. And I don't, before we get into all that, I just need the baseline of, you know, they want to kill the dragon, or I want to, you know, destroy this ring, before we start defining what's in Middle Earth and what's in our big worlds. Willie wants to prevent Max's factory from being destroyed in the riots, but his wife is a member of the Black Panthers. Okay. So I have a question about this, Gail, and this is good, right?
Right.
I want to prevent Max's factory from being destroyed in the riots. Does the fact that his wife is a member of the Black, wouldn't if the who's rioting, right, or who's having a rebellion?
1967, the Roxbury riots. I actually wrote this screenplay, so I was just using this, right? As you
So are we talking about Detroit?
No, Boston, Roxbury.
Boston. Okay. When I think of 67, I think of Detroit.
I know. It was in 1967 too.
So they're attacking anything associated with the Panthers.
No, the Roxbury area, which was mostly Jewish businessmen, okay, were and Willie, who worked for Max, who my characters, right, were Willie was a Black man and his wife was a member of the Black Panther parties, or associated with the Black Panthers, who were about to do the riots. And
okay, so it seems like having some connection to the Panthers would be helpful in preventing the destruction. If
the opposite, no, the opposite.
Well, his wife, are the Panthers destroying things in this scenario?
Panthers, oh yes.
Okay, so if Willie had no connection to the Panthers, good luck stopping them. But if Willie has an in through his wife, he has a chance. So
no, the opposite. Willie.
Why is it?
Willie wanted to protect Max's
I get what you're
factory.
saying. I get what you're saying.
No. But his wife belongs to the Black Panther Party, so her position was, you can't protect these factories. This area has to go down in the riots. We're gonna make this area go down.
It seems like the central conflict is between Willie and his wife. Right.
So she's the antagonist. That's
so
what I'm
Willie
saying.
wants certain things not to be destroyed. His wife is like, burn it all. And so
exactly.
That's the conflict. The conflict is not necessarily, if what I'm saying is that if Willie didn't know any Panthers, if his wife was not a Panther, right, it would probably be even harder for him to do what he wants to do.
No, the opposite. because she was a Black Panther. She was
Okay.
part of the Revolutionary
Maybe
group.
we're just talking past each other, but I think I think your concept works.
Concept works, I know.
Great. Okay. So this is the foundation, and then what? Right. So we have dramatic tension, and it's want plus obstacle equals dramatic tension. And then what do we do? How do we develop this? How do we build this into more? I'm gonna show, maybe I'll show a short video that gets at a few more concepts that kind of illustrates this. And we'll see if this works for everyone. Sometimes when our internets have different speeds, this works better. Others, it's very short. It's like 3 minutes. So if it's not playing well, I will send you a link to it, and we can also catch up very quickly.
Does it have sound? Sometimes you have to do it, share your sound on your.
Yes, it does, which I will.
Okay, good.
Okay. Let me pull it up to my screen, and I'm going to share my sound and my screen. This is 3 minutes. Hopefully this is working well for everyone. Let's just watch. Were we able to watch that? That was okay? It worked for you? Okay, I just want to do just a quick analysis of this, and I know it might seem trite, but bear with me. Who is the main character here? Who's our protagonist?
Snowman.
snowman, and the snowman wants.
The girl
Okay, snowman wants the girl, but why can't snowman get the girl?
trapped in a bubble.
Okay, trapped in a snow globe. Okay, great. So we have our concept. We have a clear want and a clear obstacle. So once you have that, and they had that, and you have that for whatever you're working on, you have you're clear about this is what the character wants, and this is why they can't get it as a central building block. Then you can get into tactics, meaning what does your character do to get the thing they want? And in fact, your character is defined most by the tactics they employ to get the thing they want. Some people would go as far as to say, so are people in real life. You, as a human, are defined, your character, by the things you want and what you will do to get it. How do you pursue love? How do you pursue relationships? How do you pursue professional ambition? How do you pursue creativity, right? That defines your character. Are you doing it in a way that takes advantage of people or misleads people or is aggressive? That's who you are. Are you doing it in a way that's kind and generous? Like, you are the sum total of what you want and what you do to get it. So back to the, I'm not making any comments about anyone on this Zoom. This is a theory. Back to the snowman. Does anyone remember the first thing the snowman did when he saw she beckoned to him? And what did he do? If we watched it again, we would see he tried to walk to her, and then he walked into glass, seemingly discovering for the first time he's encased in the snow globe. And remember the second thing he did? Anybody? I don't need to play it again. Yeah, Gail?
I think he took a hammer.
So right before the hammer, he took his house, which is not a house at all. It's just like a little thin piece of wood that looks like an igloo, and he threw it, and it kind of floated to the ground. And then he took off his nose, and he hammered it, and he bent it. And then he took a jackhammer, and his face fell off. And eventually he has dynamite. What do you notice about these tactics?
Self-destruct.
They become self-destructive, and we can put in the chat or we can talk. These are
I'm sorry. Okay.
Either one is
more extreme.
They're getting more extreme, escalating. Who said that? Let's see. Ken. Yes. Why? Why is the snowman using more and more extreme tactics to get what he wants? Why?
Because he's not getting what he needs.
Yes. Right. And logically in real life and in some of our stories, depending on how much realism we want, if we're going for absurdism, that's different. But we do the easiest thing first, then we try something harder, and eventually we might be doing really extreme things to get the thing we want. So this is something to think about as you develop from your log line to your longer piece. What are the steps that we will take to get the thing? And if you get it right away, you don't have that much of a story, right? It's really about all, and this goes back to like torture your character, make it really hard. They think it's going to be easy. Well, watch out, because it's not. This also serves dramatic tension. And the tension is that our story at the heart has a question: will they, won't they? Right? And we need to be clear about that so we can appreciate watching to determine, are they going to win the basketball game? Are they going to get the girl? Are they going to win the war? Whatever the thing is, will they, won't they? And if we kind of ramp up our tactics, that tension grows. There's a theory from Freud, which we can feel how we want about other Freudian theories, but he has an idea called the pleasure principle, which states that all pleasure, everything that we enjoy, comes from the building of a tension and the release of a tension. And the moment it's released, that's pleasure. So going to the bathroom when you go should feel good. because and maybe some people have to go right now, because it's releasing a tension on your bladder or your bowels. If it doesn't feel good, then you should maybe go to a doctor. But it's releasing a tension on your body, and that release of tension is a form of pleasure. If you're very thirsty, it's like, oh, wow, this water is so delicious. If you're very hungry, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. Releasing a tension. If you are someone who enjoys sex, sex is sexual tension being released, right? The building and release of that tension. People listen to narrative stories in the narrative tradition, which a lot of film is in, because there's a tension built. Will the character succeed or will they fail? And then that tension is released, and the audience or reader gets pleasure out of that. That's why we go back, or audiences go back over and over for essentially the same story, right? Whether it's in a kind of Marvel universe or in a horror lands or in a love story, we kind of know how it's going to end, but we get pleasure from it because a tension is built and a tension is released. And you want to maximize that in the narrative tradition. Is what I'm saying making sense? With that, the most powerful and most resonant emotions are hope and fear. So will they, won't they is our hope, and won't they is our fear. If the snowman escapes from the snow globe, what is the best outcome? What happens for him? How does his life look? Anybody? And you can talk or you can chat. Best case scenario for the snowman.
Gets
Anybody?
the girl.
It's the girl. Connect. Maybe he gets a life partner, and it's a very meaningful, happily ever after, right? Very meaningful connection on every level, right? That best. And this is, and I know this might seem silly, but this is something I would urge you to do with your characters in your story, especially your protagonist. Best case scenario for the thing they want. How good could it be? Falling in love for life, living happily ever after, is a rooting goal, meaning most of us can root for him because we also want that, right? If his goal was to go out and kill a butterfly, we might be curious if he succeeds, but we're not necessarily rooting for him to succeed. We are rooting for love generally, right? It's a resonant goal. If he never gets out, if he stays in his snow globe forever, what is the worst thing that happens? And this is the fear.
He's ignored.
He's ignored, sad and lonely. So he lives out his days alone, and he dies alone. This is a resonant fear, right? And I'm not trying to project too much onto this snowman, but I'm trying to look at what's there and then tease out what is the biggest hope and the biggest fear, and how do we play with that? So he blows up his world, and he's now teetering on the edge of a desk. The worst thing that could happen to a snowman in a snow globe if he falls off a desk is what? What happens? Well, he dies. If he has life and death, this is death. So now the hope is love, and it's love versus death, which is maybe one of the biggest fears, right? I don't know the order of most common fears, but it's a big fear. He's falling to his death. He sees an emergency exit, hope, right? From the fear of death to the hope of love. Oh no, I can get love. He falls into a fish tank. Oh no, fear, loneliness, again, trapped. He sees a mermaid, love, hope. And then the snow globe falls on his head. Hope, fear, hope, fear. You see what they're doing? This is something that we like to do in the narrative tradition. We like to point us towards hope and fear. And if you're writing in genre, meaning action or horror or sci-fi, these hard genres, oftentimes they do the most with this. And I don't know what you all are watching or have watched, but if you can imagine a zombie movie where we're running for our lives and we hop into a car, it's like the fear of death. Now we have the hope of escape, but oh no, there's one in the trunk. It's now coming into the car. There's fear. We fight him out the window. we're safe, but we're driving off a cliff. It's hope, fear. It's very relentless and in your face, and more subtle in kind of a drama or other kinds of stories that are not in, but they're there. It's still there. Hope versus fear. The other thing that I want to just pull from this is the ending, and maybe it worked for you or maybe it didn't. But a challenge in narrative is how can you be surprising yet inevitable? And I'm just giving you some adages you might have heard before. Surprising means not predictable. We don't like things that are predictable. I'm speaking for all audiences ever, right? Why did I sit through this? I knew that was the ending. So perhaps a predictable ending to this is he's trying to get out, he's doing different things, and he gets out, and then he gets the girl. That is logical, but it's very predictable. Surprising yet inevitable, not predictable. Inevitable means not random, right? Can you surprise us in a way that's baked into the logic of the world? So here's a random ending. The snow globe falls off the desk and a bird swoops in and grabs it and flies out a window. And we end our film with baby birds pecking at the glass. And some people might find that amusing. It's funny. It's also random. And random is easier. And if you want to be absurd and random, you should do that. I'm not putting a judgment on different taste. What I'm saying is the challenge in narrative storytelling is, can you surprise us in an inevitable way? And as you study some of your favorite films or watch new movies, I would watch for that and look at how that works, because that is often the biggest successes in narrative. Surprising yet inevitable. There's an acting teacher, Uta Hagen, who used to tell her students, go see everything. Every show, everything you could possibly get to, go see it. And when you're watching a performance and it's great, ask yourself, how is this working? What are they doing that's great? How does this work? Do I do that? Can I do that? And if it's boring or it's bad, ask yourself, why is this bad? Why am I bored right now? And do I do that? How do I make sure I don't do that? There's a lesson in everything. And a lot of the studies around screenwriting is getting under the hood and looking at the mechanics of how these things work. Does that make sense? I when I teach screenwriting, I'll mention a movie, and a student will be like, yeah, I know that movie. Usually that means they've seen it. So I'll say, oh, you know it? Okay. Well, what's the midpoint? What's the end of act 2? What's the act break? What's the inciting incident? And this is kind of really understanding how a film works, right? What's the subplot? And how is that arced? And so it's we don't know how to make a chair because we've sat in it, right? It's like someone who thinks they're an architect because they've walked around in a variety of buildings, right? It's a deeper study, right? If we're going to get serious about it, and I invite you to. And there's a database of free screenplays. You can read most screenplays for free online. I'm gonna do one more tool, maybe 2 more tools, and then I'm gonna get into feature structure. But I'm gonna pause right now if anyone has any questions about anything I've said, or they would like to try to steer me in a different direction from the direction I'm going at this moment. Anything?
So I would like to ask you a question about technique. You were talking about building stories and stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with Edgar Poe and his theory about writing stories backward, where you come up with the ending and go backwards to create the conflict and the tension of the story. So I was curious what you would think about that technique.
Yeah, that's how I work. It's very hard to say as you're writing something. Well, I got through the beginning Is it any good? Well, the beginning is the setup for the end. I don't know if the beginning's good until I know my ending, right? And they're in conversation with each other. I completely agree. That said, there are people and filmmakers and screenwriters that do other things. Fellini, and I don't know if this is true or not, Fellini, who is one of my favorite filmmakers, said when he sat down to write a screenplay, he never knew the ending. And he said, how boring would it be to know how this ends? I would just be so bored, I wouldn't even want to write it. And from that, there's, I think, great genius, La Dolce Vita or Nights of Cabiria. There's also a lot of movies he made that make no sense. So that if that's your process, I think as a crafts person, I need to know, I want to know everything structurally, and then there's the freedom to deviate. But I have something that works here. I know this works, and I can deviate along the way and adjust. But yeah, I can't write. Can you imagine telling the beginning to a joke if you don't know the punchline? Like, how does that work? And maybe if you're really quick on the spot, you can make it work. I might not be quick enough, but I definitely agree with Mr. Poe. Any other questions? Okay, I want to talk about two more strategies, and I'll recommend some books if people want. And these books you can buy, or people have made them free online, or they used to be PDFs of them floating around. These are tools, not rules. These are things that we use to enhance our stories. So in workshop, when we're writing, and I don't know if this group ever is a writing workshop where people share pages and other people give feedback. What I have found, especially in screenwriting groups, or even executive notes, there's a word that gets thrown out a lot, which is stakes. Which is, I don't know what's at stake, or what are the stakes, or can you raise the stakes? And it's kind of you could say that to any piece of writing, just if you want to give feedback and sound like you are saying something useful. But what does it mean? What are stakes? What is your definition of it? Have you come across that? It's another foundational tool in relation to narrative storytelling. So stakes. No one's jumping in. I'll just keep talking. Stakes are what's at risk. Stakes are what you lose. Sometimes when people say, you know, what is to be won or lost? Thank you. Sometimes bad notes need to be translated. When someone hears a story or an idea for a story, and they say, I don't like your main character, I find that really obnoxious. And sometimes hearing it, what I hear is like, I don't like you. And I get defensive. Like, I don't care if you like me. I don't care if you like my character. Like, I didn't ask you to like my character. But what they mean, the note behind the note, which a lot of times when someone gives a note, it's not a good note, but there's something good behind it to be learned. The note behind the note is, I don't know what's at stake. That's what people mean when they say that. And what is to be won or lost? So stakes are it's almost like a dial. You can like turn it up or turn it down. High stakes, low stakes, and to be precise about the type of story you want to tell. I'm just looking at the okay, Gabby wants to build a house but doesn't have the money. Okay, Gabby wants to build a house but doesn't have the money. Sarah, can I mess around with your concept a little bit? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what do we gain from building a house? And equally, and maybe more important, what do we lose if we don't have a house? Well, this is kind of like, for this one, I'd like to know what life looks like without the house. Are we in a comfortable life of renting something? Or is Gabby in a really rough situation? Is Gabby, is this a way out of abuse? Is this a way out of, right? If I can build this house, I can get away from this thing that is killing me. right? And if I can't, I might die. That's turning it into life and death stakes. And maybe it doesn't need to be that big, right? Gabby, lives with family members that make her feel bad about herself. And it's not life and death, but it's just really toxic, right? It depends how you want to set it. But to be really clear about what the win looks like and what the fail looks like, right? And we can go big, or we can just, dial it up a little. We were talking about, what was it? Jack and Jane. Was that our love story? Right? Okay. Jack wants Jane and dad says, get out of here, Jack. Well, what's at stake? Why does Jack, okay, love is at stake. If Jack doesn't get Jane, I imagine he's going to be sad, but I don't know how sad he'll be. I don't know what she is to him. Clarifying the stakes. If we click it up just a little, let's say he won't have anyone to go to prom with. That's a little more specific, and that is a little more, maybe in Jack's world, prom with someone you care about means something, right? Just clicked it a little bit. Click it a few more, right? If Jack doesn't get Jane, Jane will never get out of this abusive situation. That's worse, I guess. We've made Jack into a savior. I don't love that. Jack wants Jane. If he gets her, he has the love of his life. If he doesn't, oh, I know. How about their love? They come from families that are feuding and people are dying, and maybe this love, which is forbidden, could stop the war between the Montagues and the Capulets. And are those stakes higher? Yeah. I'm gonna try to turn them up all the way. I'm gonna let's see if you know this one. Jack wants Jane. If Jack doesn't get Jane, all sentient life is destroyed, because only Jack and Jane's love and their child can save the world from a war with robots. Now, what franchise did I just set up? Anybody? Anybody? That's the Terminator franchise, right? Which is maybe the highest stakes love story ever, maybe. And that might be higher than you want it to be. But it's a useful exercise. Jack wants to date Jane. Oh, we go Jack and Jane again, but she's a celibate nun. If Jack doesn't get Jane in this situation, right? Well, they're just not with each other. But can anyone put stakes on this? She's a nun. He wants to be with her. If he doesn't get with her, well, I'm going to put a ticking time clock. She's going to be transferred to a nunnery in Peru if he doesn't make it happen by the end of the week. So I gave it a deadline, which is there's a little more at stake, right? The ticking time clock gave it stakes. Do you guys get this? Ken, can you give me a name of a character? Any character? You're muted.
Sydney
Wants what?
wants a new car.
Okay. And what was the name again?
Sydney.
Sydney. It was just clipped a little. Sydney wants a new car. Stanley.
Stanley.
Stanley, why can't Sydney get a new car?
He doesn't have the money.
Okay. I was asking Stanley. So okay, Sydney wants a new car, but doesn't have the money. Okay, situation. Can anyone raise the stakes? Meaning, if he gets a car, how good is life? And if he doesn't get a car, how bad is life? How do we give this stakes? Because
He'll get a job if he gets the car.
Okay, he'll get a job. Okay. And what does that job do for him? If he gets a job, he can get out of the homeless shelter. Oh, okay. Those stakes are higher, right? And in the homeless shelter, a group of people are picking on him or threatening him, right? If he can get out, then he can move out of there and he can get his kids back. He just wants his kids back, man. Right? Do you guys get this? And this is like, oh, now I care. Now it's not just like, oh, he wants a car, but he has no money. I'm invested. I care more about whether he wins or loses based on what is at stake. Is this making sense? Okay. If we want to go even deeper into this theory, there are 3 types of stakes. There are external stakes, there are internal stakes, and there are philosophical stakes. This is a higher level theory. I can send you references for this if you want to go further. External stakes are physical, tangible, real world goals. A car. Can I get the car or not? Right? Or can I get my kids? Right? They exist, they're tangible. Internal stakes are emotional stakes. Can I feel like I am not a failure? Can I feel like I'm like I have some kind of agency in my life, right? The emotional need. Philosophical stakes are the winning worldview, right? It's often 2 competing value systems, right? And I'll give a really clear example for this, and maybe circle back to the car story. So Star Wars, the stakes, Luke Skywalker, I don't know if you're familiar with, when I say Star Wars, I mean A New Hope, the original. Luke Skywalker has a goal, a tangible goal at the end of the film. He needs to destroy the Death Star. In the middle of the film, he needed to save a princess. He needs to destroy a Death Star. That's the tangible goal. The stakes are if I can destroy it, I've destroyed it and I've kind of won this war. And if I fail, all my friends will be killed because there's a weapon on board that blows up planets. It's really clear, right? Really clear. The emotional stakes are, am I just a stupid farm boy? Could I never be great? Right? This kid who would ask his uncle, can I be in the rebellion? He's like, no, we got farm stuff to do. Or can I be a Jedi? Can I really do this? Am I smart enough and capable enough to do something great? Those are the emotional stakes. And the philosophical stakes are 2 worldviews. Is it a dominator culture of imperialism that rules by force, right? That's going to rule the universe, and that philosophy of domination? Or is it the kind of the philosophy of the rebellion, which is like, we can care about each other and we can live communally, right? And it can be based on love and respect, right? Dominator culture versus a love ethic, right? Those are the competing worldviews. And at the end of Star Wars, I'm going to spoil it for you, for those of you that haven't seen it. He blows up the Death Star, right? And he hears the voice of his mentor, use the Force, you're a good Jedi, right? And those are the external stakes and the internal stakes. But the first thing that happens is the philosophical stakes, which are put in Han Solo, who's the most selfish man in the universe, who's like, that's a suicide mission. I'm not doing that. And then at the last minute comes back and selflessly saves his friends. He kind of bumps Darth Vader. Do you guys remember this moment? And a lot of people, that was the moment they got chills. Like, whoa, Han Solo came back and saved Luke. I didn't see that coming. And back then, before people had seen this a million times. And the philosophical stakes were sitting in that character. If Han Solo can do something selflessly, maybe we could live in a world that's not about domination and fear, but about care and compassion. And those are the philosophical stakes. Now, back to this guy with his car, right? He wants a car to get a job, right? Is this about, and you can, again, this is up to you to define for yourself. And this is kind of high level story theory, but is it about, the kind of the deck is stacked and you're either born a loser or you're born a winner based on family and nepotism, or there is the opportunity, sometimes meritocracy works. And we want to believe in meritocracy. We want to believe that the little guy can get ahead if he works hard. So we're rooting for Jack. And if we see him win here with everything stacked against him, then that social order is disrupted in this film, right? And those are the philosophical stakes. Does that make sense, Ken? That was your original one. And if this is not making sense, I will send a lot of materials to help you with this. But at the bare minimum, what I want you to take away from this is stakes are what Lois said earlier, like, what do we win? What do we lose? And clarifying that deepens your story. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm just going to lay out real quick feature structure. But before I do that, I want to know if there's any questions or comments coming up.
I have a question. My little scenario about Jack wanting Jane, and she's a celibate nun. Would it be a philosophical, can't even say the word. Would it be that kind of stakes if Jack is a defrocked priest?
So it's how these usually work is there is a dominant worldview that is negative that we in the real world are also impacted by, and there's an underdog worldview that we're rooting for. So if, for example, if you're and you can do whatever you want with your concept, but if this story is at its heart philosophically about patriarchy, about women under the rule of some male hierarchy, right? And that's very true in a lot of Judeo-Christian traditions, let's just say. And this is I'd kind of want it to be more of Jane's story than Jack's story, but this is about can Jane or all women smash the patriarchy, break free of a male-dominated order, right? Or is it just kind of that's how the world is organized, and that's the way it's always going to be. And this love story tests that for her. Did I answer your question? Does that make sense? But it's the goal here. The idea here is that after watching your movie, the audience walks out and like sees the world with new eyes. And a lot of times that comes from putting a big worldview in your stakes and have those competing through characters, and reflected. And Star Wars was in a way about us. It was about the Vietnam War, and we're the stormtroopers, right? At least according to George Lucas after the fact. Imperialism, empire versus rebellion of kind of like national liberation movements. So if I'm thinking about Jane, and it doesn't have to be that, right? It could be like you can make it whatever you want it to be. It could be a world that's so sex obsessed and so, I don't know, pornographic. And she's like, can I have love and also have my values, please? Right? And she's up, but it's kind of it's taking big philosophies and putting them into characters and then having them compete with each other through characters. Does that make sense? It's whatever you want it to be. It's kind of like if you think really deeply about something you care about and you can identify your own personal contradictions where you're torn, right? And if you can get honest about that and put that into characters, that can be really dynamic. Here's another kind of adage before I put you all to sleep. The only arguments worth dramatizing are ones in which both people are right. You don't want a straw man just so someone else can push them over. You want both people to be right. Which is, and this might be personal preference, like the end of a movie, like Do the Right Thing, for example, they're both right. Mookie's right and Sal's right. Right? We're not kind of saying one is right over the other. And can you do that in a scene? Can you do that in a story, in a narrative story, in a film? right? Whatever the conflict, if it's a mother-daughter fight, we want them both to be right from where they sit. And it's so hard and it's so painful and it's so real. You guys get what I'm saying? Okay. Any other questions? I'm gonna take this and then I'm gonna lay it out on feature film structure for you. I'm gonna go to a whiteboard. So in classic screenplay, undo. Okay. Classic clean screenplay structure. People talk about 3 acts. That's still valid. I'm gonna do more than that. Okay. So we have 3 acts in what we talk about because there's a beginning, middle, and an end, and that's just how stories work. I'm going to talk about in this structure kind of the 6 most important moments, and I'm going to use language that is kind of agreed upon language in screenwriting. So in our first act, which the first and the last act are usually 25%, and the second act is usually 50% in classic screenplay structure. We have the setup. The setup is kind of the normal world. What does the world look like? Who are the characters? If this was a Disney movie, it would maybe be in a song. There's the baker and there's the, right? And this is the town and here we are. And we kind of set up our story. Once upon a time there was. And this leads us to the inciting incident. And if you know this stuff already, great. And if you don't, this is just screenplay language, which might apply to other types of narrative storytelling, like novels. I don't know because I haven't studied that form. So we have the normal world set up, and then the inciting incident is a disruption to that world. And we'll see how it impacts our main character or our characters if it's an ensemble, but it shakes things up. And it could be as big as like aliens have arrived. Is there going to be a war? Or it could be it's the start of junior year of high school and my locker is next to her and I'm so in love with her and my world is shaken up. So however you shake up your world, that's what an inciting incident does. And it creates a problem that must be solved. And so Act 2 is really about trying to solve a problem. And these lines are breaking up the acts. So when we break into Act 2, that's when we take our first step at solving the problem. So the snowman deciding I'm going to walk towards this person and hitting the glass, that is a first step. So we'll see the simplest things. Sometimes in here we get false hope, like we think we've solved the problem, but actually it's worse than we thought. We might try one thing that's easy and then that doesn't work, but we're going to double down on our efforts. And this ultimately leads to the middle of the film. I'm moving pretty quickly to what's called the midpoint. And oftentimes this is the biggest turning point in the film where we pivot from one direction to another. So the most classic midpoint that I can think of is the movie Jaws. Hopefully you're nodding your head like you're familiar with Jaws, which is we have this beach town. Our setup is our beach town where they struggle and they make their money in the summers. And the inciting incident is a shark attack. And what are we going to do? We need to make money off of tourism. Someone's been bitten by a shark. So in Act 2, the question is, what are we going to do about these sharks for the town? And in Act 2, for those of you that remember, they decide we're going to protect the people. We're going to have boats patrolling the beach. We're going to have a helicopter. We will protect these swimmers. And ultimately that doesn't work. And at the midpoint, they say, okay, beaches are closed. We're going to hunt this shark. That's a big, clear turning point in the middle. And as you look at films, you'll see a lot of these moves. This is within what's called the Hollywood convention, but a lot of other traditions, whether they're French New Wave or Italian neorealism or different Japanese or Korean traditions, they also follow the moves defined by this Hollywood convention. It's not a bad thing, and it's not easy to do it well, especially to surprise us in something we've seen so many times. So we move in this new direction. Sometimes at this point, we might need to assemble a team. So in Jaws, we gather people. Maybe this scientist who's afraid of the water would be good for our team or whatever. And then we at the end of Act 2, we try this new direction out. We have a big battle, which either we win or we lose. So, and this is the end of Act 2. Oftentimes, but not always, this is a low point. We've failed at the thing we thought we were going to do, but it doesn't have to be. We could solve the problem in Act 2 and then have to return to a bigger issue that was set up in Act 1. So I'm just going to name movies that I think a lot of us have seen. I said Star Wars already, right? Inciting incident. We get a message in a droid. You got to save me. Act 2, we're trying to like save princess. We've saved the princess. Now we got to deal with the Death Star that's following us. A movie like Little Miss Sunshine. Olive gets into a beauty pageant. So we got to, you guys know Little Miss Sunshine? I can't see you, but some of you hopefully. The second act is, can we get there? We can't afford to fly. We're driving, the car's breaking down, grandpa dies. What are we going to do? The midpoint is grandpa dies. Like, that's the biggest. What we aren't allowed to leave. We have to steal his body out of the hospital to get away. End of Act 2, we succeed. We've gotten here, but now we have a bigger problem. Like, what are we going to do? Like, Olive doesn't look like these girls. Is this even going to be good for her? What are we doing here? That's the bigger problem to solve. And this leads us to the biggest moment of the movie, of any movie, which is the climax of the film. Oftentimes, the climax in some ways echoes the inciting incident. But these are the 6 most important moments in a feature film. So you think about your character, what they want, you think about these 6 things, and if you have a sense of those, then you're probably ready to move on and write a more detailed beat sheet outline and get to script. But this is the foundational building blocks of feature film writing. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and come back to you. That was a very quick overview of feature structure. But I'm going to pause and ask if there's any questions about anything I talked about or didn't talk about this evening.
How detailed are we talking about? Is this an outline or is this a dialogue? What's in it?
In a screenplay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a great question. So I would suggest reading if you're interested in screenplays, just read them. A well-written screenplay, what it's trying to do is to play a movie in your head. And so it's an exercise in concision. We're trying to evoke the most world and most character with the least amount of words. And a good screenplay, who's read a screenplay, just like a show of hands? If you've read a good one, it feels like you're watching a movie. It just kind of moves like that. I'm going to show you something that might be helpful. Let me see if I can find this document. I was at a film festival that had a conference, and there was a lot of discussion about what is screenwriting and how does it differ from all other mediums. And there was debate and discussion, and someone put this up as an example, which I stole because I thought was interesting. I'm just going to show it to you. So they took a sentence, a prose sentence, which is the dog chased the cat up the tree. This would never be in a screenplay. It's written in the wrong tense. And it's not particularly good prose, so it's not fair to prose. But the idea was to say, how would you do this in a screenplay? And this is kind of what was proposed. In screenwriting, it would be a cat runs, chased by a dog, tongue flapping, feet digging into the earth. Ahead is a tree, safety. The cat leaps up. Present tense, action, vivid, popping. We feel like we're watching a movie. Is that helpful? Just as an example of differentiating it from prose. But really, read scripts. Read scripts to movies you love. Read scripts that other people seem to love, new and old. If you want to be a screenwriter, it's challenging because this is a relatively new medium of writing, and it changes every 10 to 20 years. So to learn the format today, you have to be looking at scripts that were written in the last 10 years. You also should be looking at scripts that are not written by writer-directors because they are writing to themselves. And that's different, right? They might write more camera. They might do things that are not meant to be in a screenplay. You also should not be reading scripts by seasoned veteran screenwriters. You want screenwriters that are relatively new, that are proving themselves by the value of their script, that are not the director. It needs to just work as a script. And those are harder to find, but they're not impossible. An example, an example of this was a couple years ago, Palm Springs. Anyone see this movie? No? Okay. So it's kind of newer writers, their breakout script, not writer-directors, but just read scripts and you'll get a sense of it. Any other there are rules. There are formatting rules, which are easy to learn. And there's software that does it for you. Question about anything else?
I have a question. It's not exactly what you're talking about, but I'm interested. This afternoon, I watched the Wolfpack. I had never seen that before. You were involved with that. Actually, I think you were story consultant and producer. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I can tell you my role, but what did you have a question about it?
The question is, how did you meet Crystal Moselle?
She's a very old friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
The Wolfpack is a documentary about a group of kids that for a period of years weren't allowed outside, and they lived in the Lower East Side in the projects, and they kind of knew New York from movies, though they were born and raised New Yorkers. And they made home videos reenacting their favorite movies, and it's kind of about them adjusting to getting out into the world. She saw them walking around Washington Square Park and was like, who are these brothers? 6 of these kids with long hair and very distinct looking. And she made friends with them and started filming them. And at a certain point, she said, can you look at something that I have? I think it's a documentary. Can you give me notes on it? And I watched it, and I had very big notes for her. In the original cut, she was the main character. It was really about her interacting with them. And I said, I don't want you in it at all. I don't even ever want to see you. I like the old footage. And I wrote that film, meaning I structured it. I even went so far as to say, these are scenes that don't exist, and I need you to create them. So I constructed things. I need a confrontation with the father. I need something where the kids feel free with their mom. I want them to make a home movie at the end as young adults. So I wrote it. I also said, I need one of them to say, we need to record audio where they say, some winters we never went outside. I just want to be really clear about the stakes, right, of the movie. So I was the writer, and writing a documentary is a job. However, this documentary was meant to be verite. It's not like an interview documentary. It's not supposed to have a writer. So when credits were being divvied out, a lot of people, especially the editor, said, we cannot have a writer. We will not get taken seriously as a documentary. So I was given a co-producer credit. I was fine with that. I also didn't know how successful that movie was going to be. It won a lot of awards and went all over the world. but I'm an uncredited writer on that documentary.
Oh, okay, that's interesting because you are not listed as a producer. And I just thought, oh, that's odd.
I am. I mean, I'm listed as a co-producer.
A
I'm on the
co-producer? Okay.
Yeah, that's the credit they agreed on giving me. Also, because the producers didn't want to dilute their credit. It gets very political. I thought the movie was interesting. I didn't think it was going to be as popular as it ended up being. Any other questions? I might start wrapping this up unless people, I don't know. I don't know what the vibe is. We're not in a room together, so we haven't really.
We probably should wrap it up, at least within the next 15 minutes or so. Probably that's people get a little tired. I think it's just been so intense and so interesting.
I'm glad. It's an impossible task to teach screenwriting in 90 minutes to a bunch of strangers on Zoom, but this is one version of that. And yeah, and Lois has my information. If people are like, oh, can he send that book or recommend something, or I can be in touch. I hope this is useful. This is hopefully just the beginning, not the end of your adventure in screenwriting. I have a movie coming out this year that will probably be in theaters in the Bay Area, called Allswell in New York. That's the new title. It was the film that was in Tribeca last year. We're playing. We're going to be in 50 cities, and I think that should include a number of Bay Area bases. Anything else? Last thoughts, comments?
Yeah,
questions?
I wanted to ask one last thing. Can you name specifically some of these new screenwriters that we ought to be reading?
Sure. Well, what I would recommend doing is starting with a movie that you love. And I'm talking Sarah, that's what I'm talking to?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Do you have a movie that is one of your favorite movies?
Yeah, but they're all so old. They're not.
I would start there with things you have, just to see how something you know really well lives on the page.
Okay.
Right? That's kind of in your bones because you've loved it for so long. Like, what's a movie that you really love? Like, if you had to put a film poster somewhere in your home, what film might it be?
Casablanca.
Great. So I'm just gonna maybe I'll share my screen. I'll show you what I would do. Here we go. There's a search engine called Google. Might have heard of it. Casablanca. I'm spelling it wrong. Screenplay, PDF. Maybe I'll write the word free. Let's see what happens. Here's the first one that comes up.
Oh, neat.
And I can download it. Nice.
Wow.
And I could print it or I can put it on a Kindle. And here it is. And I can read it. And there's a lot, right? So then this is an old film, but so what? We can read it. I would start there. I would start with a film you're passionate about and read it and look at how it works on the page, and then build your way up to more modern films. And I would think about films in the last 10 years that have come out in the last 10 years that you've respected or liked or loved. When I have discretionary time and I'm watching movies, I'm not watching new movies and I'm not watching American films, but for my own education in the industry, I need to read those. So the one that I mentioned was Palm Springs, which was young screenwriters' first script that got some big talent attached to it and did very well, and is an interesting film. I think it's surprisingly sophisticated. What were the interesting movies this year? Were there any interesting movies this year?
Oppenheimer.
Okay, yeah. Oppenheimer, read it. You can get that script. I thought After Sun was kind of interesting. I don't know if people saw that. It's a bit more experimental. English language, American films, kind of avoid those. People seem to be going to see this Barbie movie. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to see it. I have a 16-year-old son, and I liked Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I liked it. We went to see it. I thought it was a good script.
This is going to be fun. Thank you.
Sure. And they're free and they're online. They're easy to find. And reading scripts is one of the best things to do as you're kind of building your screenwriting muscle. Any other questions?
Well, Ben, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Hope it was useful.
I really appreciate it. And we will maybe have some questions, and I'll send them. If I hear from other people, I'll get back to you. But I thank you just so much. It was just so good for us.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. It
Wonderful.
was really educational. Thanks for sharing.
Sure. And have a good night. I'll be in your neck of the woods in December. If I see you around. And Benicia.
You win the Academy Award.
Thank you.
How long is Allswell in New York?
How long?
is the film?
How long is the film? It's 95 minutes.
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I hope you win the strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I think we will. I think we're gonna come out of this ahead. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Very good.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.